Dark Cast Network. Out of the shadows comes the best of indie podcasts. Now concluding the Summer of Love series with Son of Sam Part 2. Part 1 discussed the victims and the killer himself. And in this part, we're going to discuss any other suspects that were led into the case, as well as the eventual conviction and the legacy left behind. My name is DJ, and this is the Mythical True Crime Podcast. Local resident Cecilia Davis was walking her dog at the scene of the Moskowitz-Valentini shooting when she saw police patrol officer Michael Cantino ticketing a car that was parked near a fire hydrant. Moments after the traffic police had left, a young man walked past her from the area of the car and seemed to study her with some interest. Davis felt concerned, whether because he was holding some kind of dark object in his hand. She ran home only to hear shots fired from behind her in the street. Davis remained silent about the experience for 4 days until she finally contacted police, who closely checked every car that had been ticketed in that area that night. Berkowitz's yellow 1970 Ford Galaxy was among the cars that they had been investigating. On August 9th, 1977, New York Police Department Detective James Justice telephoned the Yonkers Police Department and asked them to schedule an interview with Berkowitz. The Yonkers police dispatcher who first took Justice's call was Wheat Carr, the daughter of Sam Carr and sister of Berkowitz's alleged cult confederates John and Michael Carr. As soon as Justice mentioned the name David Berkowitz to Wheat, she said, quote, "Let me tell you about him. I know him. He lives right behind me." She also informed Justice that Berkowitz had shot and wounded her black Labrador retriever named Harvey, and that Harvey was her father Sam's dog. When Justice heard Sam, he had a very good feeling that Berkowitz was the real culprit that they had been looking for all along. Justice asked Yonkers police for some help tracking down Berkowitz, and according to Michael Navanti, the Yonkers Police Department sergeant, the department had its own suspicions about Berkowitz in connection with strange crimes in their jurisdiction, which were referred to in one of the Son of Sam letters. Yonkers investigators even told Justice that Berkowitz might be the Son of Sam. The following day, on August 10th, in 1977, police investigated Berkowitz's car, which was parked outside of his apartment building on 35 Pine Street, Yonkers. They saw a gun in the back seat, which prompted them to search the vehicle, and found a duffel bag filled with ammunition, maps of all the crime scenes, and a threatening letter addressed to Inspector Timothy Dode of the Son of Sam Task Force. Police decided to wait for Berkowitz to leave his apartment rather than risk a violent confrontation in the building's narrow hallways. They waited to obtain a search warrant also for the apartment, worried that their search might be challenged in court. The initial search of the vehicle was based on the handgun that was visible in the back seat, although possession of such a gun was legal in New York State at the time, it also required no special permit. The warrant still had not arrived when Berkowitz exited his apartment building at about 10 p.m. and entered his vehicle. Detective John Falatico approached the driver's side of the car and pointed his gun close to Berkowitz's temple, while Detective Sergeant William Gardella pointed his gun at the passenger side. A paper bag containing a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver of the type that was identified in ballistics tests was found next to Berkowitz inside the car. Berkowitz then stated flatly, "Well, you got me." As described of the Son of Sam, 1981, by Lawrence D. Klausner, Faltico remembered the big, inexplicable smile on the man's face. These were his quotes. "Now that I've got you," detective said to the suspect, Who have I got?" "You know," the man said. What the detective remembered was a soft, almost sweet voice. "No, I don't. You tell me." The man turned his head and said, "I am Sam." "You're Sam." "Sam who?" "Sam. David Berkowitz." An alternative version claims that Berkowitz's first words were reported to be, "Well, you got me. How come it took you such a long time?" Valetico was officially credited by the NYPD as the arresting officer for the son of Sam. Police searched Berkowitz's apartment and found it in disarray, with satanic graffiti on all the walls. They also found diaries that had kept since he was the age of 21, 3 stenographer notebooks, all nearly full, wherein Berkowitz meticulously noted hundreds of fires throughout New York City. Berkowitz himself confessed that he was the Phantom of the Bronx, an unidentified individual or individuals responsible for more than 2,000 arsons committed around the city throughout also the 1970s. Soon after Berkowitz's arrest, the address of the apartment building was changed from 35 Pine Street to 42 Pine Street in an attempt to end its notoriety. Berkowitz was briefly held in Yonkers Police Station before being transported directly to the 60th Precinct in Coney Island, where the Son of Sam task force was located. At about 1 a.m., Mayor Beam arrived to see the suspect personally. After a brief wordless encounter, he announced to the media, "The people of the city of New York can rest easy because the fact that the police have captured a man whom they believe is the Son of Sam." Berkowitz was interrogated for about 30 minutes in the early morning hours of August 11th, and he quickly confessed to the shootings and expressed interest in pleading guilty. The investigation was led by John Keenan, who took the confession. Now, during the questioning, Berkowitz claimed that his neighbor's dog was the one for the reasons that he killed, stating that the dog demanded the blood of pretty young girls. He said that the Sam mentioned in the letter was his former neighbor Sam Carr, and that Harvey, Carr's black Labrador, was possessed by an ancient demon which issued irresistible commands that Berkowitz to kill people. A few weeks after his capture, Berkowitz was permitted to communicate with the press, and in a letter with the New York Post dated September 19, 1977, he alluded to his original story of demonic possession, but closed with a warning that it had been interpreted by some investigators as an admission of criminal accomplices. Quote, "There are other sons out there. God help the world." At the press conference February 1979, however, Berkowitz declared that his previous claims of demonic possession were that of a hoax. Berkowitz later stated in a series of meetings with his special court-appointed psychiatrist, David Abramson, that he had long contemplated murder to get revenge on the world that he had felt rejected and hurt him. Now, 3 separate mental health examinations determined that Berkowitz was competent to stand trial. Despite this, defense lawyers advised Berkowitz to enter a plea of not guilty by reasons of insanity, but he outright refused. Berkowitz appeared calm in court on May 8, 1978, and he pleaded guilty to all of the shootings. At his sentencing 2 weeks later, Berkowitz caused an uproar when he attempted to jump out the window of a 7th-floor courtroom. After he was restrained by several officers, he repeatedly chanted, "Stacy," the name of his last victim. "Stacy was a whore," he shouted. "I'd kill her again. I'd kill them all again." The court ordered another psychiatric examination before sentencing proceeded. During that evaluation, Berkowitz drew a sketch of a jailed man surrounded by numerous walls. At the bottom he wrote, "I am not well at all." Nonetheless, Berkowitz was again found competent to stand trial. On June 12, 1978, Berkowitz was sentenced to 25 years to life for each murder, to be served consecutively. He was ordered to serve the time at Attica Correctional Facility, which was a maximum security prison in upstate New York. Despite prosecutors' objections, the terms of Berkowitz's plea guilty made them eligible for parole after 25 years. Now, after his arrest, Berkowitz was initially confined to a psychiatric ward in Kings County Hospital, where the staff reported that he seemed remarkably troubled by his new environment. On the day after his sentencing, he was taken first to Sing Sing prison and then to upstate Clinton Correctional Facility for psychiatric and physical examinations. 2 more months were spent at the Central New York Psychiatric Center in Marcy before his admission to Attica. Berkowitz served about a decade in Attica until he was relocated around 1990 to Sullivan Correctional Facility in Fallsburg, where he remained for many years. Later, he was transferred to Shawangunk Correctional Facility in Ulster County. Berkowitz described his life in Attica as a nightmare. Now, in 1979, there was an attempt on Berkowitz's life in which the left side of his neck was slashed from front to back, resulting in a wound that required more than 50 stitches to close. Berkowitz refused to identify his assailant, and he claimed that he was only grateful for the attack. It brought a sense of justice, or, in Berkowitz's own words, the punishment I deserve. In 1987, Berkowitz became an evangelical Christian in prison, and according to his personal testimony, his moment of conversion occurred after reading Psalm 34:6 from the Bible, given to him by a fellow inmate. He says he is no longer to be referred to as the son of Sam, but the son of hope. Soon after his imprisonment, Berkowitz invited Machali Martin, an exorcist, to help him compose an autobiography, but the author wasn't accepted. Years later, Berkowitz developed his memoirs with assistance from fellow evangelicals. His statements were released as a 1998 interview video, Son of Hope, and a more extensive work released in book form entitled Son of Hope, The Prison Journals of David Berkowitz, and that was in 2006. Berkowitz does not receive any royalties or profit from any of the sales of his books. He has also continued to write essays on faith and repentance for evangelical websites. A website is maintained on Berkowitz's behalf by a church group, since he is not allowed access to a computer. Berkowitz stays involved in the prison ministry and regularly counsels troubled inmates. While in the Sullivan facility, he pursued education and graduated with honors from the Sullivan Community College. Berkowitz was entitled to a parole hearing every 2 years as mandated by state law, though he has consistently refused to ask for his release, sometimes skipping the hearings altogether. Before his first parole hearing in 2002, Berkowitz sent a letter to the New York Governor George Pataki requesting that it be canceled. He wrote, quote, "In all honesty, I believe that I deserve to be in prison for the rest of my life. I have, with God's help, long ago come to terms with my situation and have accepted my punishment," end quote. Officials at the Sullivan facility rejected his request. At his 2016 hearing at Shawangunk, New York, Berkowitz stated that while parole was unrealistic, he felt he had improved himself behind bars, adding, quote, "I feel I am no risk whatsoever." His lawyer, Mark Heller, noted that prison staff consider Berkowitz to be a model prisoner. Commissioners denied a parole. His 12th parole hearing was denied in May 2024. Ahead of his hearing, he admitted to the Post that he knew that he had no chance of getting granted parole, but still attended the hearing. Quote, "To not attend a hearing can be viewed as being defiant towards authority, and that's not me," Berkowitz said. He also said, "Most of all, I attend in order to openly apologize for my past crimes and to express my remorse." And his next parole hearing is scheduled for May 2026. Now, in 2002, during the DC sniper attacks, Berkowitz wrote a letter telling the sniper to stop hurting innocent people. He made his comments in a 3-page letter to Fox News personality Rita Cosby after she wrote him seeking a comment on sniper attacks. During June 2005, Berkowitz sued one of his previous lawyers for the misappropriation of a large number of letters, photographs, and other personal possessions. Hugo Harmatz, a New Jersey attorney, had represented Berkowitz in the earlier legal effort to prevent the National Enquirer from buying one of his letters. Harmatz then self-published his own collection of letters and memorabilia called Dear David in 2005, which he had obtained from Berkowitz during his consultations. Berkowitz then later stated that he would drop the lawsuit only if the lawyer signed over any and all of the money that he had made and given it to the victims' families. In October 2006, Berkowitz and Harmatz settled out of court, with Harmatz agreeing to return the disputed items and donate part of his book profits to the New York State Crime Victims Board. After this quick message, we'll be right back. Hello there, listeners. Whether you're new or you've been with me from the start, a great way to catch up and dive deeper into the world of mythical true crime is to check out my earlier shows. I've covered everything from Bigfoot to aliens and ghosts. Take a moment and browse through the past episodes, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Your support means everything to me. Now, something that was touched on in earlier talks was the satanic cult accomplice claims. Now, in 1979, Berkowitz mailed a book about witchcraft to the police in North Dakota. He had underlined several passages and written on a few marginal notes, including the phrase, Arliss Perry, hunted, stalked, and slain. Followed to California Stanford University, the reference was to Arliss Perry, a 19-year-old North Dakota newlywed who had been murdered at Stanford on October 12, 1974. Her death and a notorious abuse of her corpse in the chapel on campus was a widely reported case. Berkowitz mentioned that Perry attack in other letters, suggesting that he knew details from it from the perpetrator himself. Local police investigators interviewed him, but in 2004 had concluded, quote, he had nothing of value to offer. The Perry case was solved in 2018. After his admission to Sullivan Prison, Berkowitz claimed to have joined the satanic cult in the spring of 1975. And in 1993, he made these claims known when he announced to the press that he had killed only 3 of the Son of Sam victims, Loria, Esu, and Sarani. In his revised version of the events, Berkowitz said that other shooters were involved and that he had fired only the gun in the first attack against Loria and Valentini, and the 6th attack, Esu and Sarani. He said that he and several other cult members were involved in every incident by planning the events, providing early surveillance of the victims, and then acting as lookouts for each other and drivers at the crime scenes. Berkowitz stated that he could not divulge the names of most of the accomplices without putting his family at direct risk. Among Berkowitz's alleged unnamed associates was a female cult member who he claimed fired the gun in the De Niro Kinnan murder. Berkowitz attributed their survival to the alleged accomplice's unfamiliarity with the powerful recoil of a .44 Bulldog. He declared that, quote, at least 5 cult members were at the scene of the Freud Dell shooting, but the actual shooter was a prominent cult associate who had been brought in from the outside New York area with an unspecific motive. A cult member who he had identified only by his nickname, Manson 2. Another unnamed person was the gunman in the Moskowitz Valenti case, a male cult member who had arrived from North Dakota for the occasion, also without explanation. Berkowitz did name 2 other cult members, John and Michael Carr. The 2 men were sons of the dog owner Sam Carr, and they lived in the nearby Warburton Avenue. Both of these other, quote, sons of Sam were long dead. John had been killed in a shooting, judged a suicide, in North Dakota in 1978, and Michael Carr had been in a fatal car accident in 1979. Berkowitz claimed that the perpetrator in the Damasi Lamino shooting was John, and he had added that the Yonkers police officer was also a cult member and was involved in this crime. He claimed that Michael fired the shots at Lupo and Placido. Author Maurice Terry wrote that Michael was an active member of the Church of Scientology and noted that Berkowitz at the time of his arrest had been in possession of a list of telephone numbers including the number of the Fort Harrison Hotel, the church's spiritual headquarters in Clearwater, Florida. In a video interview posted in 2016, Berkowitz said that he had been influenced by reading literature from the Process Church of the Final Judgment. Now, journalist John Hockenberry asserted that, even apart from the satanic cult claims, many officials doubted the single shooter theory anyway, writing, "What most don't know about the Son of Sam case is that from the beginning, not everyone bought the idea that Berkowitz was acting alone." John Stentucci, a Queens district attorney at the time of the killings, and police investigator Mike Navanti both expressed their convictions that Berkowitz had accomplices. NYPD officer Richard Johnson, also involved in the original investigation, opened an unresolved discrepancy in statements from witnesses and surviving victims, indicting Berkowitz did not act alone. He was saying, quote, "Why are there 3 suspect cars, 5 different suspects' descriptions, 5 different heights, different shapes, different sizes of that of the perpetrator? Someone else was there." Other contemporaries voiced their belief in the satanic cult theory, which included Donna Loria's father. Berkowitz's survivor, Carl De Niro, stated his opinion that, quote, "more than one person was involved," but admitted that he could not prove the cult theory. His conclusion rests on the criticism of Berkowitz's statement to the police was totally false. Now, Dell's recollection is that he physically bumped into Berkowitz outside of the Wine Gallery restaurant as he and Freuden departed and walked to his car where the shooting occurred. Berkowitz, in contrast, told police that he passed within a few feet of Dell and Freuden shortly before they entered the car. Dell contends that he and Freuden passed no one on their way to the car, and that the position of the car parked on the curb would have made it impossible for Berkowitz to have sneaked up onto them within a few minutes between their encounter outside of the restaurant and the shooting of the car. Dell thus reasons he was shot by someone other than Berkowitz. Again, journalist Maura Terry published a series of investigative articles for the Gannett newspapers in 1979, which challenged the official findings that there was a lone gunman in the Son of Sam case. Vigorously denied by the police at the time, Terry's articles were widely read and discussed. They were later assembled in a book, largely implied that these reports of accomplices and a satanic cult activity, the Son of Sam case was reopened by Yonkers police during 1996, but no new charges were filed. Due to the lack of finding any evidence, the investigation was eventually suspended, but remains open till this day. In 2001, Terry's work served as a basis for the Netflix series The Sons of Sam, A Descent into Darkness. From prison, Berkowitz continued to assert and expand upon his claims of demonic possession. He stated in a series of 9 videos in 2015 that, quote, "the voice he heard was that of Sam Hain, a druid devil and the true origin of Son of Sam." He added that it never was a dog, saying that detail was fabricated by the media. Now, Berkowitz's later claim that he had been in a satanic cult were widely dismissed by many skeptics. Breslin rejected his story of satanic cult accomplices, stating that when they talked to David Berkowitz that night, he recalled everything step by step, by step, by step. The guy was 1000% recalled, and that's it. He's the guy and there's nothing else to look at. Other skeptics included a former FBI profile, John Edward Douglas, who spent hours interviewing Berkowitz and concluded that he was an introverted loner, not capable of being involved in a group activity. NYPD psychologist Dr. Harvey Schlossenberg stated that Against the Law, a documentary about the Son of Sam case, that he believes that the satanic cult claims are nothing but a fantasy concocted by Berkowitz to absolve himself of guilt. In his book Hunting Humans, 2001, Elliot Layton argued that recent journalistic attempts to abridge or even deny Berkowitz's guilt have lacked all credibility. Now let's talk about the legacy that this case has brought. Decades after his arrest, the name Son of Sam still is widely recognized as one of the most notorious serial killers in modern day, with pop culture manifestations perpetuating this. Berkowitz himself continues to express remorse on Christian websites and on more mainstream news, including speaking out against gun violence and instead spreading the message to, quote, take the glory out of guns. Nasa Moskowitz, who previously had not hidden her hatred for Berkowitz, wrote him a letter shortly before her own death in 2006, forgiving him for killing her daughter Stacy. Moskowitz lost all of her children at young ages. Jody, age 9, an impossible suicide in 1968. Stacy and Ricky, age 37, in 1999, of an autoimmune disease. She had no survivors except, according to the New York Post, her daughter's murderer. After rampant speculation about publishers offering Berkowitz large sums of money for his story, the New York state legislature swiftly passed a new law that prevented convicted criminals and their relatives from making any financial profit from books, movies, or any other enterprises relating to the stories of their crimes. The United States Supreme Court struck down the so-called Son of Sam law for violating the First Amendment right to free expression in 1991 of the Simon Schuster versus Crime Victims Board. But New York produced a constitutionally revised version of the law in the following year. Similar laws have been since enacted in 41 states and at the federal level. So there you have it. A law that consists where killers and their families can't profit off the horrible crimes that they inflicted on others. And that concludes another captivating episode, delving into the world of mythical true crime. I appreciate you joining me tonight as we listen to the facts from these true crime tales. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll uncover even more mysteries. Until then, thank you for listening to tonight's episode. Good night.